For more on this, now we're joined by Professor Alex van den Heever, the Chair of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at the Wits School of Governance. Mr. van den Heever, a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's launch right into it. Now, in the mounting calls for the President to step down, we're seeing various issues cited as the reasons. This is the high unemployment rate. This is the current electricity crisis. I mean, we're seeing the rising cost of living. But then another question remains, if it had not been for the Phala-Phala farm, would we be seeing these calls? I mean, looking at where they're coming from, obviously opposition parties, but as well as a faction of the ANC. So are these calls motivated by a seeming lack of governance under his administration?
I think the calls that we're seeing are primarily coming from, I'd say, rather hysterical calls from people who've been very much part of incredibly serious crimes against the state in South Africa, serious corruption, and potentially responsible for the collapse of many of South Africa's state-owned enterprises. It appears largely that the people that are dissatisfied at this point are the ones who are essentially having their kind of money pipelines cut off in the various state-owned enterprises, as there's an attempt to kind of turn around the sort of worst or the most egregious aspects of state capture. And I think that a lot of them do see that there is they're running out of runway, because the closer we get toward finalization on these issues, more of them are actually going to end up in prison. And so I think that we are going to see an escalation in this kind of call, but I don't think it's about a call for better governance, as many of them are party to severe breakdowns of governance in South Africa and have absolutely no interest whatsoever in making the state in South Africa work better.
Now, so let's speak to the issue of governance, looking at the issues that I've raised before, the rising cost of living, the petrol price, youth unemployment, rising levels of gender-based violence. Can the president be truly blamed for what we see happening in our country at the moment?
I think that there's a degree of accountability which government as a whole over the past 28 years has to accept for some of these crises that we are seeing. So Eskom itself and the load shedding is definitely a consequence of what's happened over the last 28 years in state capture. In the case of the delivery of public services and a lot of the socioeconomic problems that we are seeing, the failure of many parts of government to perform properly is not something that has just materialized in the last 4 to 5 years. It's something that has grown systematically since around about 2000. And we have seen then a systematic breakdown in the capability of large parts of the state, which contributes toward these failures. We've also seen that government itself over the last 28 years has not prioritized the development of the country and the development of people. If it had, it would have ensured that the basic education system was functional and that we were actually redistributing skills in South Africa and opportunities. We would have a proper social security system implemented timelessly in South Africa. We haven't had that over the past 2 decades, despite many opportunities to consider such policies. So I would say that the culpability lies with many of those people calling for Ramaphosa to be removed, because they were very much part of that. So I think that there is a question about the credibility of the ANC as opposed to the president on his own. And there is definitely a credibility question over the functionality of large parts of the government at this point. And so the solutions to this don't lie with removing Ramaphosa from the presidential position, which is one which people target, because if you capture that position, you can capture large parts of the state. The question is whether or not we need a general election to basically, because we're losing confidence in government as a whole, not to have one faction of the ANC replace another faction of the ANC, all of whom are struggling over the spoils.
All right. Mr. Professor, Alex van der Heever, thank you so much for your time, sir. That's the Chair of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at the Wits School of Governance, just helping us make sense of these growing calls against the President to resign.